For those of you I haven't met, I think I know most people on the call. My name is Scott Burton, and I'm the General Manager of the Wine Victoria Export Program, which obviously includes the US. But thanks to our very generous support from Global Vic and the Victorian government, has now been expanded to include the UK, China, and key markets in South and North Asia. Today we're joined by Luke Lucas, who's the Trade Manager, Food and Beverage for the Americas for the Government of Victoria. Damien Musha, Market Entry Program Manager for the US for Wine Australia. Mickey Dean, the US Business Development Manager for Wine Victoria. And Kate Criven, Export Program Manager for Wine Victoria. So today we're basically going to just run through a number of agenda items, but really focused on how to maximise this Famil that we're all involved in a couple of weeks. But before we sort of jump into that, for those of you that are not aware of the US program, really this is a commercially focused program, which is around supporting those wineries that are currently exporting to the US, as well as creating pathways for new wineries to enter the market. The strategy really has two pillars, and participation is the first one, which is really around building that critical mass of Victorian wineries exporting to the US. So that's about creating pathways for market entry. And the key driver of that is the program that Damon heads up, which is the market entry program that many of you will be aware of. We've had a great cohort of wineries go through that program, and as such, seeing the number of wineries exporting to the US increasing quite significantly. The second part of the program is on amplification, and that's really supporting those wineries that are in market to create more opportunities to get more Victorian wines placed with distributors and retailers. And to do that, we have a series of retail promotions to really drive and incentivise the trade to take on more wineries and to run better programs. Investing in market resource, that's obviously Mickey, who's been at the coalface since January 2023. A really strong trade engagement program, which is around creating blocks of trade to engage and drive awareness. We've just come out of a pretty strong block in January, February, which included at least 6 or 7 key trade activities across a 6 to 7 week period. Supported by comms, so influencing the influencers, and then obviously what we're here to talk about today, which is inbound trade missions, or Famils. And this month's Famil, it's the latest of a series of inbounds that we've run, both from the US and also Asia. And I guess the key takeout is that these Famils do deliver commercial opportunities ongoing, and even from the one in June last year, we're still seeing that the fruits of that endeavour come to the fore. So we all know there's no substitute for getting people to region, the key decision makers, and showing them what we do best. So that's probably the flavour of today's session is how can we prepare ourselves to put our best foot forward and really deliver an amazing experience for our buyers, but also one that resonates and actually has commercial outcomes moving forward. So obviously that's why we're here. That's enough from me. I'll hand over to Luke to sort of take us through a bit of a market overview and doing business in the US, and then we'll funnel down to Mickey at the end there and Kate to with more of the operational considerations. So over to you, Luke.
Beautiful. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate the intro. Just very quickly, I've met a few of you who are on the call. For those that don't know, I am Luke. I joined about 18 months ago, Global Victoria, and I'm running the food and beverage desk. For a 15-second background, I actually started a food company with my wife 10 years ago in Australia and relocated to the United States a few years ago. So everything that I'm about to talk through today is stuff that I've experienced personally. And I was actually tapped on the shoulder to run this desk because of that experience. So I know what you guys are thinking. I hope I know what you guys are thinking. I hope I know the kind of conversations that you're having. And hopefully I can provide a little bit of insight. What I don't want to do is go real high level and talk about generics that you probably are all familiar with in terms of how big the US market is and what the opportunities are. I think we all know that. I want to keep this relatively practical so you guys are ready to rock and roll when everyone comes down. And I will be coming down as well. So I'm going to kick it off with a practical slide. Don't quote me exactly. I prepared this myself, so the regions may not line up exactly, but the purpose of this slide is really to give you a sense of the size and scale of the United States at a regional level. A lot of people consider the United States as a single entity. And one of the first conversations that I have is that that's not necessarily helpful, not just because of the size, it's 330 million people, which is about 13 Australias, but people are different depending where they live. And there's an old joke that, New Englanders consider spicy food to be pepper. And if you talk to someone in San Antonio, their definition of spicy is going to be very different to that. So it's really critically important that you consider America in bite-sized regional pieces. And a strategy in New England or the Northeast is going to be different to that of the Southeast or the South or the Pacific Coast or the West Coast. And it's really something that you should keep in mind because your conversations will be different and the people that you're speaking to from those regions will be looking for different things. So don't make the mistake of thinking, well, you need to take on all of the United States, like generally you need to do, obviously, with Australia. You can go regional and still have a reasonably large business just by attacking those regions. Additionally, a lot of complexity comes as you grow in the United States. Alcohol in particular is regulated very differently to what it is in Australia. There are state regulations that are very different, and there are even municipal regulations. The municipal level of government here is equivalent to the council level. So municipalities are able to make alcoholic regulations just as the states can, and obviously above all of that are the federal regulations as well. So the larger you grow, the more complexity there is. So from this slide, I really want you all to take away the idea that you don't have to take on the United States as a whole. It can work to your advantage to identify specific regions. I know Wine Victoria has a South by Southeast strategy, which is what they're targeting on. So it certainly pays to kind of piggyback off that, but there may be other regions that you can consider as well. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Kate. And I mentioned this very briefly about the size variation, and what that means is that the US is very, very competitive. Obviously, Australia is quite parochial and the United States is as well, but just from a sheer numbers and scale perspective, there's more than 5 times the number of wineries, but obviously in addition, there's the imported market as well. So that means that these buyers are constantly hearing the same story. They're constantly hearing that their winery is the best and the way they grow their grapes are the best, and all this kind of thing is very consistent. And that doesn't just apply in wine, that applies to any category. So it's really important that you are delivering some additional value. Now, that could be by way of your product, it could be in the way of your pitch, it could be in the way of your story, but there has to be something that the buyer can take away with them after they meet with you. That could just be a feeling, maybe that you give the sense it's a premium product, maybe it's the variety is really good. There has to be something specific that is going to make their job of selling your product easier. At the end of the day, they generally are going to have to take down a product in order to put yours on the shelf. So what's the compelling reason to do that? Whose are they going to take down to replace yours with? So the more information that you can give them, the better experience you can give them, whatever it is that's unique to you is going to make it easier for them to say, right, this is one I'm taking down because this one has X, Y, and Z attributes that I want on that shelf. So it's really, really critically important that you consider how you can differentiate yourself from that perspective. And that kind of leads into my next point, which I really, really stress frequently in a number of conversations that I have with the companies that I'm working with. And that is that brand Australia doesn't carry the same weight as it does in Asia. We're a little spoilt as Australian companies and exporters dealing with Asia because the minute you say Australia, it's considered a premium product. And many companies, as I've noted there, believe that that made in Oz sticker will make the sale for them. And I've spoken to companies that have told me, I spoke to a coffee company once that said, well, everyone in the world knows that Melbourne coffee is the best coffee in the world. So that's all, I don't need to sell the product. And I said, well, I can tell you that American buyers know no such thing. Another nut-free spread was trying to get into the market, and they were told that they could get into Singapore for 5 times the price that they were sitting on the shelf in Australia just by virtue of the fact that it was an Australian product. And this is fantastic. Don't get me wrong, it's wonderful. And we don't have a bad brand in the United States necessarily, but we don't have that immediate premium. So it's really, really critical to know that you can't just kind of fall back on that, oh yeah, it's an Australian thing, everyone loves it, it'll be great. We have a trusted brand. We have a known brand. We've got that. We do have that element of kinship, and there is an association of Australians and alcohol, for better or worse. So there are definitely things in our favor. But we don't have that just, oh yeah, it's an Australian product, therefore it's worth 3 times the price. So you really need to think more about your specific value proposition, as I said in the previous slide, and you don't fall back on that whole, it's Australian, because that ain't going to work. Next slide, please, Kate. This is my final one. I don't want to take up too much time because I want to let Damon and Mickey go on about the specifics to wine. But the other thing, and this is what I experienced very shortly after I relocated myself. So I moved in the middle of COVID. It was an interesting experience, and I went to a couple of food shows and chatting with buyers, chatting with brokers, chatting with various different stakeholders, and pretty much consistently across the board, the first question they would ask me is, are you staying here? And I said, well, I was going to say, well, what do you mean? Of course, I've got my product here. I'm going to sell it everywhere. The product's always going to be here, ideally. And they said, no, are you personally going to stay here? There is an issue in the United States. Everyone kind of comes and sees the dollar signs, and they figure that there's so much going around. I just need 1% of the market and it's easy and rah, rah, rah. And so all these guys are used to that. These guys, I mean, these buyers. And so they want to know that you're going to stick around. Now, obviously, in this case, you guys aren't coming to the United States. This is obviously they're coming to you. So that's fine. They're not expecting you personally to be here. But my point is they want that confidence that the commitment to the market is going to be there. In my case, they wanted to know that I was here, I'm staying here. In your case, they're going to want to know, right, I'm having this conversation with you. You're going to take this seriously. There's going to be some kind of follow-up. There's going to be some kind of support. Now, that might be in terms of monetary resources. It might be in terms of people resources. It could take many, many different forms, but they're going to want to have that confidence that you're going to follow through. And that last point is really critical. The follow-up is critical. You really need to stay on top of these guys. It kind of goes back to that whole, the US is big, so much competition. You can be forgotten very easily. It does make it easier if you've given them that unique selling proposition, you've provided that experience, whatever it is, but you do need to keep following up with them. Don't be afraid to hound. I mean, you're not going to go crazy, but you do need to stay on their back. You want to keep checking in with them. And then you want to provide whatever information they've asked for on a timely basis. You want to stick to what you say you're going to do. It is really, really critical in the United States. Otherwise, you're just going to be forgotten, unlike everyone else. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I'll be sticking around obviously to take questions at the end of the presentation. But they're really the main items that I wanted to focus on at a somewhat of a high level. Otherwise, I think that'll do it for now, and I'll answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Luke. I thought that was very relevant information. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said. So definitely, I think everybody should take what Luke said on board, and that should be standard operating procedure as far as kind of doing business and understanding how to do business in the U.S. I would even say, taking it a bit further from a regional standpoint, really, it's every state, as folks that are in the program know, has its own unique laws. So you can even divide it up even smaller still, and looking at regions and then looking at individual states as well. So what I wanted to do is to help to level set everyone as far as how to engage with the buyers once the buyers are there at the various wineries that they're going to be visiting here in the next couple weeks out where you are in Victoria. I think this kind of comes from experience that I've had kind of running these, and we've had, various wineries that come in with various stages of, frankly, preparedness for the types of questions that the buyers are going to be asking. So I want to make sure that everybody is reading from the same playbook in terms of what chances are these buyers are going to be asking from you as a winery. And ignorance is not an excuse in terms of not being prepared. So this is really the name of the game. I think first and foremost, I'm glad to hear that Mickey's going to run through a little bit more information as far as kind of the buyers, but in particular, know your audience, do your research. So Mickey's going to outline who the various buyers are, where they're based. Do a quick Google search. It doesn't take you that long to find out where the accounts are based, how they buy, what markets they're involved in. I mean, show that you've done your homework. Think of it, I always say, kind of think of it as a job interview. You wouldn't walk into a job interview not knowing basic information about the company. Do the exact same thing as far as kind of as far as the customers that are coming to Australia. Like I said, understand who they are, how they buy. I would imagine that they'll have a little bit more information in terms of direct import versus warehouse. Do they tend to work within the traditional three-tier model, direct to retail? Are they looking for national brands? Are they looking for exclusive brands? Really understand who the individual buyers are, what they're looking for, and that's going to give you an opportunity to customize your story. These next 3 points: be authentic, be focused, be prepared. I think a lot of that Luke went over. But yes, I think the last point that I would make on that is be brief. Make sure that you can tell your brand story in a compelling manner and be in and be out quickly, because you don't want to overtalk, over communicate, start to ramble. So next slide. So what constitutes preparation? I think these are the key things that every winery that's going to be presenting should have at their fingertips. One, obviously, is what we discussed about earlier, and that is storytelling. Be able to tell your compelling and ownable story quickly. And when I use the term ownable, I mean, if you replaced your story with another brand and it still kind of worked because it's too generic, then you really need to tighten up your story. So make sure it's ownable and ownable uniquely to your winery. The second thing is pricing. You need to be ready to talk pricing right there as you're tasting the wines. Make sure that you know your Ex Works pricing for each SKU that you're pouring in AUD. If you already have, and make sure also that you understand how the pricing translates into what in the United States is called SRP or in Australia RRP. So making sure that you can translate, that you understand that if you're quoting a Ex Works price of $10, you have a general idea in terms of what that's going to look like as far as US retail shelves. Obviously, the models can differ a bit, but I mean, you can be pretty close in just about all circumstances. And then the last point, I would say that you're not going to have a lot of time to sit around and haggle, especially in front of other buyers and when other wineries are waiting. So I would argue that you might want to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, but if you're putting in a bunch of fat, hoping that you'll get to the point, somewhere down the line, that you'll come to a happy agreement in terms of pricing, I would argue that you should rethink that strategy and you should come at it with a much kind of, sharper price, maybe not the sharpest, but don't get too cute with your pricing. The other point is volume. I mean, that's the other key question. It's like, great, you're presenting me this wine, but if you only have half a pallet remaining, and oh, by the way, just trust me, the next vintage is just as good. That's not going to fly with most buyers. So you need to be able to quickly explain, okay, wine X, how it's made, the accolades, have a quick summary of some of the top scores, what your price is, and what your volume is, what you can make available in the United States if they jumped on an opportunity next week. That is really critical. And if you're fumbling around or you don't have the information, or it's let me get back to you in a week, well, guess what? The other wineries already have presented that information and you're already working from a deficit. So make sure that you have all of that information at your fingertips. If you need to have a cheat sheet next to you, bring a cheat sheet. Better that than kind of looking at them with glazed eyes when they start asking these types of questions. The final thing, winemaking. I think most of you will probably be able to talk in good detail in terms of how the wines are made, but make sure that you have some basic information from a winemaking perspective as well. So kind of final remarks, and then there are a couple questions that I could quickly touch upon. First of all, for those wineries that are in the market entry program this fiscal year and you have inventory here, if a buyer wants to take a look at a particular product or products, we are more than happy to send that wine out on your behalf. Second point is, you as the winery, and this is what Luke touched upon, you own the relationship, not Wine Australia, not Wine Victoria. We are here as a guide and a support, but we're not your sales manager. So make sure that you take the bull by the horns, and you're responsible for the commercial outcomes. And as we just talked about earlier, follow up is key. Send thank yous, engagement, offer to get additional samples. If you need Wine Australia to help with COLA waivers because you need to bring in some more wines, we can certainly do that. And we can even help with finding some importers to clear if there's a particular buyer on that trip that if there's a particular buyer that just doesn't have the ability to clear or do direct import yet. I did see one question, and it asked about what type of volume the buyers are looking for. I think that's actually a pretty good segue into Mickey's part of the presentation, because he'll have a better idea in terms of he can talk a bit more about these buyers, what they're looking for specifically, and who they are. So thank you very much. And if you guys have questions, feel free at the end of the presentation. I can answer them to the best of my ability. So over to you, Mickey.
Yeah, so I don't have to read everything here. It's kind of written out as far as what these buyers are looking for, but I'll give you a little bit of a insight on who these people are. Steve McGinty, I've never met him personally. Let me just go back for a second. When we did our first Famil, the real focus was on the southeast, and we really had about 60 days till we really landed on a formal date and timeline to execute. And it was really hard to get buyers on this trip in short order. So the first trip was really focused on distributors in the southeast, and that really worked out well. But this time around, I was really focused on trying to appeal to buyers, and they said that they needed a good 6 months in order to get ethics approvals and things like that. And so when I started to invite people, I got to 8 really quick, and couldn't believe it. And then Whole Foods asked for 2 spots, one for a buyer of own brands and one for branded business. And then, if you don't know, Amazon owns Whole Foods, and for some reason it didn't pass the sniff test. And about 2 months ago, we were told by the people at Whole Foods they couldn't come. And so it left us at 6, but we got 6 really good people coming. Steve McGinty, he's a guy, he's been a buyer for a long time. He's based, the company HQ is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but he's based in Ohio, and he buys for 200 odd stores. Giant Eagle, they're not high end, but they're not in the low end. They're definitely a middle class type of grocery outlet. So he said, $15 to $20 is really what he's looking for. In Ohio and in Pennsylvania, they have really strict guidelines on pricing, where there's standard margins that the retailer has to make, as well as the distributor in these cases. So, but they're really great markets. Pennsylvania and Ohio are both, top 15 wine markets in the United States. Pennsylvania's in the top 10. So Steve McGinty's a big win. Really nice guy. He's really excited for this trip, and so we're lucky to have him, but I've never met him in person before. I've spoke to him a lot of times. So I'm looking forward to spending some time with Steve, and know we'll get some good results out of him. Sarah Parker, who I've met, Fresh Time is a really nice chain, primarily organic, but sustainability is really the most important feature for their stores. They get 75 stores across a 10-state territory. They are owned by a chain called Meyer. Doug Meyer is a multi-billionaire, very wealthy guy based in Michigan. And so, there's collaboration between Fresh Time and Meyer. And so we're hoping that, success with Fresh Time could lead with success with the Meyer chain as well. So Sarah's great. She's going to be really focused on supporting some projects. I certainly know that. Next would be Andrew Wallach. Andrew is his mother is from Melbourne, so that's a plus. He's very familiar with. He's kind of a newcomer to the wine business. He was an investment banker and a bunch of things up till about 8-10 years ago when he had the bug for the wine business. And in his short time in the wine business, he knows more about wine than anyone I've ever met in my life. He's extremely studious guy. He's really looking for, the model with Wine Access is they like to have really high scores. They're very sensitive about Wine Searcher. So we need to make sure that, the wines that are in Wine Searcher are not priced a way that they can't make their money. They like to make big margins, but he's always looking for gems, and he's capable of ordering container loads. And like I said, he's really a guy that's been very engaged. He's been very supportive of several of the Australian wineries in the past, and it'll only improve through this trip. Tamika, so Central Market is owned by a mother company called HEB, which is really the kingpin of wine or of wine stores in Texas, really high end. Central Market's even higher end than HEB. They have they don't have a lot of stores. They have 10 stores, but they have all their stores. They have probably a dozen displays at any given time on a pallet of wines. So they are a wine destination, and they're looking for varietals like she listed there, Chards, Gruners, Sauvignon Blancs, to name a few. But she has a totally open mind. Her boss, Keith Jonasek, has really given her the mandate to find some gems from Australia. He said that we have really not really done justice to the category for a long time, like most of the retailers out there. And what I've explained to most of these retailers is, what's happened to the Australian category over the last 20 years is one thing, but Victoria has never changed direction in those 20 years. With whatever happened in the U.S. market, Victoria's always maintained the same level of quality, same commitment to the wine business. So these guys are really super engaged and have a super open mind. Next would be Bill Newton. I've never met Bill before, but I've talked to him a bunch of times. He's been the import buyer for Binny's. Binny's is the kingpin of Chicago, the only market in America where Total Wine tried to enter is Chicago, that they failed. They packed their bags in a very short order of time, within a couple of years, to realize that they couldn't fend off Binny's. So Binny's is the iconic wine store in Chicagoland. They have huge wine sets, lots of display locations. He's really, like you said, he's open to everything. He's a really nice guy, and he's really focused, as you mentioned, on cool climate wines that we have plenty of to offer in Victoria. And lastly is Mark Harmon. He was a guy that I thought would be really important for a lot of wineries that don't have a footprint in the United States, that could start with almost one-stop shopping. There's soon to be a distributor in California, which is not on the map right now. And we talked about that today. and he's adding, new distributors so that they represent about 40 states before long. But this is a group that it's not like he can mandate anything, but what he does is he brings this group of distributors to meetings twice a year, where we would get an audience with these family-owned distributors. They're all small to mid-sized distributors, like-minded, that aren't beheld by any of the big suppliers out there. They're independent for a reason, and they want to find gems out there. So this could be a really great opportunity to get expansion into, it might not be the 30 states, but it could be 10, it could be 5, it could be all of them, depending on the proposition. So Mark is going to be a great addition to this trip, as is everyone. I think everyone that's coming is really, they're excited, beyond excited about this opportunity. I think none of them, with the exception of Andrew, have ever been to Australia, so this will be new to them, and I'm looking forward to getting some great results out of all these buyers. So please, and I think Damon and Luke nailed it. We did sales processes and things like this when I was at Constellation, and they always talked about frequencies that to really engage with distributors. And the one that I always found to be the most important is progress checks. And they can be done weekly, twice a month or monthly, but they have to be consistent. You have to have a consistent dialogue with your distributors. Out of sight equals out of mind. It's a very common thing that the only surprises in this business are disappointment, and that's a result of not having connectivity. So, as you get engagement with distributors, the real key is to have a real frequency developed as to connectivity points, touch points. And again, it's a 5-minute chat, once a month, once a week, however you guys set it, but it's very, very important. So that's it for me.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. I'll quickly just talk through some logistics, and then we'll open it up to some questions. While we're here, I would like to introduce Kate Reed, who, if you want to give us a little wave, Kate. Some of you might have heard from Kate. She is managing the on-the-ground logistics for all the buyers, all their flights, accommodation, every winery, lunch, dinner, etc. So big job. Thanks, Kate. And I just wanted to also mention at the end of this, both, I think Damon and Mickey both talked about the importance of having your pricing and availability and volume of the wines. So I'm going to be sending around a short jot form, which I've just got a picture of there. And if everyone could fill that out with every wine, as much information as possible as to what wines you're going to be showing, we're going to basically pull that together into a Google sheet and send that to all the buyers at the beginning of the trip. So as they go around, they'll know what they're tasting and know what the volumes are and what the prices are, so they can make some pretty quick decisions. So I'll send that out after the webinar to everyone that's involved. And yeah, the more information, obviously, the better. So I'll open it up to any questions. And Kate, did you have anything you wanted to add about the trip?
Unless you want me to run through just a high-level program, but majority of producers are obviously across, but I can happily just do a high level of the program if you like.
Why not? We've got a couple of minutes. Thanks.
Sure. So thanks, Mickey, for running through all of the guests. So all of their flights are ticketed. They all land in on Friday, the 15th of March for the majority of guests, with a bit of a relaxed day into Melbourne, and then a dinner that evening at Cumulus that will be hosted by De Bortoli upstairs at Cumulus Inc. And then the following day, we have a Wine Victoria immersion hosted by Max Allen, and that will be a morning session from 9:30 till 12 at the Stoke House, followed by a lunch. From there, they head across to the Yarra Valley, and similar to how we ran one of the visits in the Mornington, working with more of a varietal tasting over in the Yarra. So kicking off with a Chardonnay tasting over at Giant Steps, featuring a number of different producers, and then on to dinner that evening at Jaden Ong's. The next day, bit of a cuddle a koala at the Hillsville Sanctuary and stop in with some skibbies, and then into another regional Pinot tasting at Mac Forbes. Again, a cab tasting at Helen's Hill before we head off to Geelong. Again, invite a number of producers to join us for a dinner in Geelong before we head out to Mr. Austin's for a visit out there and a tasting and early lunch. From there, we trek across to the Grampians. Rory from The Story is kindly doing a tasting for us so they can get a bit of an understanding of the landscape at One Tree Hill and the Grampians. Staying up at Mount William Station, again, a hosted dinner with producers from the Grampians region, overnighting again before we do a stop at Mount Langy, lunch in the underground cellar at Seppeltsfield, and a stop at Best's. Again, a barbecue at Mount William hosted by some of the Pyrenees and Grampian producers. Just waiting on a few confirmations there from attendance from a few producers, so I'll liaise with Kirsty to finalise that piece. Stop through the Pyrenees into Peric and Tultani, lunch at Blue Pyrenees before we head off to the Macedon Ranges, and then the lovely Renata has kindly coordinated a dinner at Lions Will with a number of Macedon and Heathcote invited producers on that particular evening. Stop in at, forgive my pronunciation, Sanguini in the morning at Heathcote, and some other varietal tastings at Tellurian with a few producers. A pub lunch before they do a host. Sorry, go ahead. No questions. Then a hosted dinner for some of the other producers that haven't had the opportunity for a actual visit. That will be held at Lancemoor, Macedon, and an opportunity to do an hour and a half tasting there before a dinner on site. And then guests head off in the morning, hosted with Global Victoria and Wine Victoria to the Grand Prix before they fly out the following morning. So a fairly action-packed program.
Sure is. Thanks, Kate. And sort of shows, you know, when you get those few minutes, make them count. All right, I'll open it up to any questions. And there's been a couple of comments on the group chat, which hopefully John, Mickey has answered, but anyone else got any questions? Looks all good. Well, I've just popped all the contacts on the end. I'll share this recording and slide and the jot form with all the pricing with everybody.
Hey, sorry, this is Damon. I just wanted to make two more kind of mentions based upon kind of what I saw here. First of, or in what I heard. First of all, I think you know, having someone like Mark Harmon is amazing to have on the trip, because if a retailer isn't necessarily ready immediately to do full DIs, they could potentially work through Mark and utilize Mark as a you know, as a distributor conduit. So even if let's say, I'm just making something up, even if Binny's isn't quite ready for full container loads based upon the trip, working through someone, you know, like the independent distributor network could potentially allow, especially some of the smaller wineries, to be able to sell direct into to a retailer, you know, like Binny's as an example. The other thing I would note is that if you are a winery and you already have product in the US, make sure you know who your distributors are on a state-by-state basis, because if you get that question, you want to be able to A, quickly answer that question, and B, be able to connect the distributor to that retailer just as quickly as possible. So I think that's extremely important as well. So if you're already in the market, maybe the Ex-Works pricing isn't as relevant, but what is relevant is the distributor landed price that they can offer to a particular retailer, as well as availability, et cetera. So again, it's know your audience. tailor your communication to your audience.
Thanks,
Yeah, and
Damon.
just
And
to
did
add to
you
what
want to?
Damon just said, if there's a situation where you might not be in a state, having Giant Eagle that wants your brand in Ohio will make it a whole lot easier to identify a distributor. So don't be concerned if you're not in a market. That will totally help me help you identify a distributor in a market, you know, where you don't have a presence. So it's not just in case someone from Texas or someone wants your wine, you're not there, we'll find a place for you if they want the wine. No question. But if you already have a distributor there, it's good, like Damon said, that we could identify that too.
Thanks, Mickey. And Mickey or Damon, did one of you want to talk to how many different bottles would you recommend us showing each?
How many bottles per SKU, Kate?
Yeah, per wine brand, I guess. It's come from Cellar Door Manager. It doesn't actually say who the brand is, but I think it's relevant for all wineries. How many different products should they be showing?
Oh, I see. I would say, the ones that you think have the real commercial opportunities. I wouldn't limit it to anything, but if you don't have more than a couple hundred cases of it that you could export, I would probably avoid that.
And I would just probably recommend not sort of overwhelming them with 10, 20
No, exactly.
products.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
put your best
yeah,
foot forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, for example, what we do with the market entry program, we limit it to 6, and we kind of say, what are those 6 SKUs that can best tell the breadth and depth of your story, and also that you could potentially make available in the US. I mean, unless there's a really extenuating circumstances, I think, or it proves a very salient point. I think showing wines that you really can't make available doesn't really do a lot of good as well.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Can I just interrupt and ask a question if that's all right?
Yeah.
Tennille from Chalmers here. We already have distribution in quite a few states in the US, so completely looking forward to this. Obviously, there's more opportunity, hence why we will be involved. We produce from 2 different regions in Victoria, so both Heathcote, which is relevant obviously to this upcoming Famil, but also the Murray-Darling region. Is it okay for me to bring my Murray-Darling wines along to this tasting in Heathcote?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great, that's awesome. And so we've got like 11 SKUs in the US already available. Is that overkill to bring all of those that are already physically over there?
I personally think that it's sort of best to show fewer, because it really is, I mean, you've obviously seen the breadth of the number of wineries that they're going to visit, and maybe have a couple of extras on hand if someone is looking for something specific, but having a look at what they're looking through maybe in the presentation and bringing, I mean, obviously, Chalmers have got some amazing, diverse, it's interesting varietals, and I think just to bring a handful, 5 or 6 that represent what you do would be better than.
Great. And one more question. Sorry. In terms of filling out those little forms about what's already available over there or what we're showing in terms of the retail over there, etc. I know state by state has different rules and regulations around obviously alcohol and price points. So are we just going for a ballpark if state by state is priced slightly differently already currently on the ground over there?
We've asked for
good question,
Australia
Kevin.
pricing.
I think most people know, like in Pennsylvania and Ohio, where they're a little bit different than the rest of the world, that they know that they're different and pricing will not be the same for them necessarily. So, but that's a great question because one size does not fit all. But I think if a general ballpark, especially if your wines are on Wine Searcher, that would be, the best way to probably identify your price points.
Yeah, thank you.
And I might just jump in on the opportunity for SKUs. Obviously, the dinner also provides that, additional chance to bring along a few SKUs that best represent you. So if, you wanted to then add a bit more diversity, the lovely Renata's kindly, we have a bar set up that, is a bit of a grab and go. So rather than doing a very formal, paired dinner, then an opportunity to add a few more SKUs for the dinner component for additional tasting there too. And probably just finally for me, just a big shout out to all of those regional contacts that have kindly helped on the logistics side across the board. It's certainly a big logistical movement for 6 guests coming out. So greatly appreciative of everyone's time.
All right, thanks everyone. I'll stop the recording and forward this around, and I'll provide everyone's contact. So if you come up with questions, they'll be on the end of the slide.
And Kate, are you sending this out to everyone on the list? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I will. I'll send it to everyone on the Famil. Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining, and thanks, Damon.